A lay of the dying cowhand's lamentation. Darcy John Bouchard, copyright symbol mate. A voice says, "Cry out." And I said, "What shall I cry?" Isaiah 40:6-8. That I'll die for one little kiss and feline a goodbye. Marty Robbins, El Paso. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. W.M. Shakespeare, Sonnet 6. In ancient Egypt, beekeepers would barge hives on the river Nile, leapfrogging just ahead of the nectar, one step before spring, bringing life to the desert honey for Pharaoh LHP. A lay of the dying cowhand's lamentation. Introduction. The Bard of Armorth, the cowboys, the singing cowboy, horse and ballad, the cowboy's lament. The Bard of Armorth. Originally written as an Irish drover ballad, the Bard of Armorth is thought to be about Patrick Donnelly, made Bishop of Dromore in 1697, the same year as the issuance of the Bishop's Banishment Act, an act for banishing all papists exercising any ecclesiastical jurisdiction, and all regulars of the papist clergy out of this kingdom, an act of the Parliament of Ireland, citation 9 Will 3C1, one of a series of penal laws, as opposed to civil laws, which seek to redress private wrongs, and in some jurisdictions distinct from criminal law, enforced by the state in its own name, imposing penalties for violation. All bishops of the Roman Catholic Church were banished from Ireland, to protect the official state church, the Church of Ireland. The Bard of Armorth later mutated into a handful of laurel about a man dying of syphilis in a London hospital and musing back on his days in alehouses and whorehouses. Immigrants settling in the Appalachians also brought a version, The Unfortunate Rake, which was sung as early as 1790, about a young soldier dying of mercury poisoning, a result of the treatment for venereal disease syphilis, who requests a military funeral. There is no known early copy of The Unfortunate Rake, believed to be originally known from a collection of Irish tunes published by Smollett Holden, c. 1805. It is in Crosby's Irish Musical Repository, 1808. The countless songs of the Unfortunate Rake family all share a description of the funeral. The earliest known copy of the song is the Buck's Elegy, c. 1800. The pills are in it in the line, I took pilocosia, all sorts of white mercury. Author's note. Pills of white precipitated mercury, percipiate of sublimate of mercury, mercuromonium chloride, HgNH2Cl. Much older than the Unfortunate Rake, ointments of white mercury were originally used as a cure for syphilis, the great pox, as early as c. 1510, being cited as a standard treatment for syphilis in Ephraim Chambers' Cyclopedia, an universal dictionary of the arts and sciences. London, 1752, under venereal disease. Recurring lesions of syphilis called gummers can attack different places in the body, including mucous membranes. Distinguishing between two chlorides of mercury, calomel, Hg2Cl2, and corrosive sublimate, HgCl2, calomel is still around. There was serious disagreement among doctors about the use, or misuse, of calomel at the period of the War of 1812 and earlier. Dosing with mercurial curatives, including calomel, could produce sore mouth, bleedings, gums, profuse salivation, the loss of teeth, caries in the jawbone, and open sores, literally holes an inch in diameter or more through the nose, cheek, or under the jaw of the patient, a hole in his bosom. This song found its way to the cowboy camps and campfires across the West. One Night with Venus and A Lifetime with Mercury. Only a handful of the traditional texts have been as graphically frank in their commentary on the cause of the young man's demise, as that of syphilis. Later texts tended to treat the matter obliquely, or have rationalized the situation by having death caused by other, usually more violent, means as in the streets of Ladue. Harry Jackson learned a Wyoming variant in the summer of 1938. This recording may also be heard as part of the album, The Cowboy, His Songs, Ballads, and Brag Talk, Folkways FH 5723. A Negro version, St. James Hospital from Texas, is ostensibly a cowboy ballad, but it should properly be considered a unique form of the unfortunate rake ballad, separate and distinct from the Streets of Ladue variants. As examination of the text reveals traces of earlier forms of the ballad not usually found in the more common cowboy versions, the setting is the St. James Hospital of British broadside texts. The dying man calls for his parents to sit with him, and complains of various aches and of a broken heart, elements found most frequently in versions of the Bad Girl's Lament. More than a simple change of sex is made in the transformation from a ballad about a misguided male rake, or soldier or sailor, to that of a young girl gone wrong. In the instance of each of the three male characters, the funeral ceremony requested by the dying one is a totally military one, and no request is made for the deathbed visitors. In the Bad Girl version, the death march is more conventional, though still retaining military overtones, and deathbed communicants, preacher, doctor, mother, are asked for. Bright Summer Morning, a West Indies variant of the Bad Girl's Lament, was brought to the Virgin Islands by British colonizers during the 19th century, when, for a short time, England took over control of the islands from Denmark. A version, sung by Mrs. Viola Penn, to her own guitar accompaniment, was collected by Van Dam and T. Combs on Street Thomas, Virgin Islands, in November 1953. The Cowboys. I wish I could find words to express the trueness, the bravery, the hardihood, the sense of honor, the loyalty to their trust and to each other of the old trail hands. Charles Goodnight. Author's note: when we were far from the ranches as daylight paled, I cooked over his turds and scrub brush, and when I'd partaken of my hardtack and beans and salted back bacon, I whistled a merry old song of the trail. On the vast prairie where firewood was often scarce, cow chips were regularly used for fires. Camp cooks relied on them, as when they were dry, they made a hot fire. Of course the burning chips gave off an unsavory smell, but, thankfully, it did not affect the food. One old range cook who used his hat for a bellows claimed that in one season he wore out 3 good hats trying to get the damned things to burn. Charles Goodnight, on his first cattle drive to Colorado, invented the chuck wagon by revamping an army surplus wagon. Devising the cowboy version of Meals on Wheels, the wagon was complete with compartments for bacon, beans, coffee, spices, flour, and liquor. First chronicled by the famous Western writer, Zane Grey, in his 1934 novel The Code of the West. No written code ever actually existed. The Code of the West was concentrated into the Code of the Range, and not all of it by any means depended upon the 6-shooter. No one can comprehend this code without knowing something about the Code of the Old South, whence the Texas cowboy came. I was happy in the midst of dangers and inconveniences. Daniel Boone. In 1820, Daniel Boone died at a relative's home on the Missouri frontier at the age of 85. Pre-1845 Texas. On the 24th of February 1836, the Alamo was attacked by Mexican forces and all of its more than 180 defenders were slain, including William Travis, Jim Bowie, and Davy Crockett. Texans under Sam Houston defeat the Mexican army and captured General Santa Anna at the Battle of San Jacinto, and Texas became a republic. It had been a different place before the swarm of Southern whites changed the ethnic balance. Anglo-Texas had its roots in Southern, not Western, culture. On the 16th of December 1826, Benjamin Edwards rode into Mexican-controlled Nacogdoches, Texas, and proclaimed himself the ruler of the Republic of Fredonia. Edwards negotiated an agreement with the Cherokee people offering to share Texas in exchange for their help in defense against the Mexican soldiers. 6 weeks later, Edwards' ill-planned revolution disintegrated and he fled to the United States for sanctuary. The first settlers were slave-holding planters or would-be slave owners, both white and black. Texans referred to the then 27 states of the Union as the nation. The latest white settlers were the persecuted Irish Catholics who earlier gradually accepted from the Mexican government refuge from the British land thieves who had stolen their nation, enslaved the people and outlawed under penalty of death the Catholic religion. The states across the Mississippi were much farther away than the Indian territories, which were athwart to the cattle trails. Note, in 1838, the 5 civilized nations of Indians were moved to the Indian Territory, or Oklahoma Territory opened to settlement in 1889. Young Indians from the Indian Nation sought work throughout cattle country on drives that brought cattle to the reservations set up by the government in the Dakotas, as well as to ranches in the northwestern United States and western Canada. All this country needs is a little more water and a better class of people to move in, said a newcomer near Fort Smith, Arkansas. The cowboy he was talking to grinned and responded, "Yeah, they say that's all hell needs." The cowboy originated in Llano Estacado, the dry, treeless plains of Texas and New Mexico, also called the Staked Plains. The Texas cowboy, along with the Texas cowman, was an evolvement from and a blend of the riding, shooting, frontier-formed southerner, the Mexican Indian horseback worker with livestock, the vaquero, and the Spanish open-range rancher. The blend was not in blood, but in occupational techniques. The driving of millions of cattle and horses from Texas to stock the whole plains area of North America while, following the Civil War, it was being denuded of buffaloes and secured from Indian domination, enabled the Texas cowboy to set his impress upon the whole ranching industry. The cowboys lived a hard and dangerous life. Only special people with special talents and characteristics could live in such a world. During the cowboy era, 1866 to 1886, 1/6 of the cowboys were Mexican, and many others were African American or Native American. Note, there were about 45,000 working cowboys during the heydays of the cattle drives. Of those, some 5,000 were African American. The cowboy became the best-known occupational type that America has given the world. It was very difficult working 18-hour days. Most cowboys were young men who learned on the job. They had small or medium physical frames, as large men were too heavy to ride Mustangs. Just as Colonel Samuel Colt with Texas Ranger Captain Sam Walker made all men equal in a fight, the horse made all men equal in swiftness and mobility. The Colt Peacemaker, the weapon that became known as the gun that won the West, was a .45 caliber manufactured by Colt's Firearms Manufacturing Company in Hartford, Connecticut in 1873. At the time it sold for $17.00. Mexican vaqueros first taught American cowboys the difficult skills of taming wild horses, rounding up wild longhorns, breeding, roping, branding, and driving the herds. During the 1870 SATS, some 40,000 cowpunchers, 5,000 of whom were African Americans, transported some 10 million cattle to market. If you're gonna drive cattle through town, do it on Sunday. There's little traffic and people are more prayerful and less disposed to cuss at you. Anytime a large herd moves through a civilized area, there's a lot of shit to clean up. This was a dirty, dangerous, and monotonous task, and the only way to drive cattle fast is slowly. In the saddle from dawn to dusk every day, with 2-hour shifts every night, cowboys made the trip from southern Texas across the plains to the Kansas railheads in 2 to 6 months. The constant risk of death or injury from wild stampedes, extreme weather of all sorts, tricky river crossings, and attacks by rustlers made the cowboys tough and forceful men. Although these livestock herders were marginal participants in fighting the Mexicans, exterminating the buffalo, and annihilating American Indians, they must be differentiated from such other Western types as lawmen, outlaws, gunfighters, soldiers, and hunters. The cowboys, to the manor born, were workers, not killers. Cowboys driving cattle to the market could expect to make between $25 and $40 per month. A trail boss might make as much as $125 per month. A heap of people need a heap of killing. Alfred Henry Lewis, the old cattleman. Between the killer and the cowboy standing up for his rights or merely shooting out the lights for fun, plenty of six-shooter play is to be found in most of the books about old-time cowboys, yet hardly one of the professional bad men was a representative cowboy. Bad men of the West and cowboys alike wore six-shooters and spurs, they drank each other's coffee, they had a fanatical passion for liberty for themselves. But the representative cowboy was a reliable hand, hanging through drought, blizzard, and high water to his herd, whereas the bona fide long rider bad man, who usually had to stay in the saddle for extended periods of time while on the dodge. Of course, the elements were mixed in the worst of the bad men, as they are in the best of all good men. No matter what deductions analysis may lead to, the fact remains that the Western bad men of open-range days have become a part of the American tradition. They represent six-shooter culture at its zenith, a stage between receding Bowie knife individualism of the backwoods and blackguard, machine gun gangsterism of the city. Pistols are almost as numerous as men. It is no longer thought to be an affair of any importance to take the life of a fellow being. Nathan A. Baker, Cheyenne leader, October 1868. After robbing a bank, Henry Starr walked 3 miles out of town and was eating supper at a farmer's house when the telephone rang. Note: the telephone was invented in 1876. The first community to have a telephone after the White House telephone was installed was Deadwood, South Dakota. When the farmer answered it, he turned to Starr and said, "The sheriff says the bank was held up and he wants to know if I've seen a suspicious character out this way." To this, Starr responded, "Tell him the robber is at your house eating supper and for him to come on out and get me." With that, he finished his meal, paid for it, and left. The rowdy, nomadic cowboy occupied the lowest rung on the social ladder in a supposedly classless West, which was in fact controlled by Eastern, or even European, financiers, cattle barons, railroad magnates, politicians, and speculators. The itinerant cowboys were really cogs in an industrial machine, moving cattle toward their final destination, the eastern cities, where a new immigrant working class needed beef to fuel their work in the horrific post-Civil War factories and sweatshop. Besides herding cattle, cowboys also had jobs like branding new cattle and castrating and dehorning older cattle to be taken to market and roundups. The longest and most challenging route was the Western Trail between Texas and Montana. During the Great Cattle Drives, a single herd might consist of 2,500 head of cattle, and be attended to by only 8 to 10 cowboys with some wranglers to take care of their remuda of horses. Cowboys would ride a string of horses depending on what task was at hand. A mild horse would be used at night and a quick horse would be used for cattle roping and tending. The cowboy's philosophy was common in its simplicity: honesty was not something to should flirt with, you should be married to it. You can judge a man by the horse he rides. There never was a horse that couldn't be rode, there never was a rider that couldn't be throwed. When you climb into the saddle, You'd better be prepared to ride, and there's a whole lot more to riding a horse than sitting in the saddle, letting your feet hang down. If your horse doesn't want to go there, neither do you. There are more horses' asses than horses, and a smart ass just doesn't fit in the saddle. Polishing your pants on saddle leather don't make you a rider. If you're riding ahead of the herd, take a look back every now and then, to make sure it's still there with ya. Solving problems is like throwing cattle. Dig your heels on the big ones and grab the little ones round the neck. Toss in your rope before build in a loop, don't catch the calf. Go after life as if it's something that's got to be roped in a hurry before it gets away. Sometimes you get and sometimes you get got. Confidence was the feeling you had before you understand the situation, and being too positive in your opinions could get you invited to a dance, in the street, to the music of shots, nicely aimed. Don't interfere with something that ain't bothering you none. When in doubt, let your horse figure it out. Speak your mind, but ride a fast horse. Some men talk because they have something to say. Others, 'cause they got to say something. And the length of a conversation doesn't tell anything about the size of the intellect. Genius has its limits. Stupidity knows no bounds. So, talk low, talk slow, and don't say too much. Wide open spaces don't breed no chatterboxes. Never miss a good chance to shut up. Remember that silence is sometimes the best answer. More so, you don't need decorated words to make your meaning clear. Say it plain and save some breath for breathing. Don't worry about biting off more than you can chew. Your mouth is probably a whole lot bigger than you think. Good judgment comes from experience, and a lot of that comes from bad judgment. The only substitute for good manners is fast reflexes. It don't take a very big person to carry a grudge. Forgive your enemies. It messes with their heads. After eating an entire bull, a mountain lion felt so good he started roaring. He kept it up until a hunter came along and shot him. The moral: when you're full of bull, keep your mouth shut. Bronco busters and saddle tramps. A cowboy who could tame wild horses. Contrary to popular thinking, not all cowboys could ride just any horse, though most could ride any broken mount. But the bronc buster, also called a bonk peeler and a bronc breaker, was a breed apart. These men, with a special type of horse sense, earned not only the esteem of the other cowboys, but usually better wages. The cowboys never referred to themselves or each other as cowboys. They were cowhands or bronco busters or saddle tramps, an exclusive community that lived a poor life, mostly outdoors, having unconsciously developed their own code of laws which were not formally written down, consisting of hospitality and assistance to others, a dislike for bragging or complaining, praise for bravery, and pride in skill with horse, rope and gun. Raymond Adams, a Western historian, explained it best in his 1969 book, The Cowman and His Code of Ethics, saying, in part, "Back in the days when the cowman with his herds made a new frontier, there was no law on the range. Lack of written law made it necessary for him to frame some of his own, thus developing a rule of behavior which became known as the Code of the West. These homespun laws, being merely a gentleman's agreement to certain rules of conduct for survival, were never written into statutes, but were respected everywhere on the range. Though the cowman might break every law of the territory, state and federal government, he took pride in upholding his own unwritten code. His failure to abide by it did not bring formal punishment, but the man who broke it became, more or less, a social outcast. His friends hazed him into the cutbacks and he was subject to the punishment of the very code he had broken." According to Richard M. Dawson, 1973, some of the generic qualities of the cowboys were True cowboys were expected to possess a love of horses, heroic courage and independence, freedom and adventure, and loyalty to the outfit. 2. Skilled horsemen. They assumed that workers on the ground, sheep herders, farmers, railroad men, belonged to a lesser breed. 3. Given to the task of tending cattle, they were supposed to have endurance, and not complain. And 4. They were generally reticent because they tended to mind their own business. Again, their philosophies were simple. After weeks of beans and taters, even a change to taters and beans is good. Or, use it up, wear it out, make do or do without. Or yet, the biggest troublemaker you'll probably ever have to deal with watches you shave his face in the mirror every morning. Shoot first and never miss. Batmaster Son. Contrary to popular thought, most cowboys didn't shoot up the many towns that they arrived in, as most of them didn't carry guns while they were riding. Carrying a gun was a nuisance to the riders that scared both the cows and the horses. Cowboys traveled light, and stored their meager worldly possessions in a war sack or Yanigan bag. Inside was generally everything the cowboy owned, typically his pistol and ammunition, an extra set of clothes, spare parts for equipment, playing cards called Bible, a bill of sale for his horse, if purchased other than captured wild and broken, and maybe a harmonica or a few precious letters. Of the long-tailed heroes of the revolver, who often did society a service in shooting each other, about 1/3 of all gunmen died of natural causes, living a normal lifespan of 70 years or so, and, of those who did die violently, shot or executed, the average age of death was age 35. The gunfighters turned lawmen lived longer lives than their persistently criminal counterparts. Nor can the bad men be logically segregated from the long-haired killers on the side of the law, like Wild Bill Hickok and Wyatt Earp. W. H. Hudson once advanced the theory that bloodshed and morality go together. When a bad man dies, he either goes to hell or the Pecos. On the 24th of November, 1835, the Republic of Texas established a force of frontiersmen called the Texas Rangers. The Rangers were paid $1.25 per day for their services. The members of the Texas Rangers were said to be able to ride like a Mexican, shoot like a Kentuckian, and fight like the devil. When a group of rowdy outlaws went on a terror in a Texas town, shooting out the lights and windows, killing several citizens, the town quickly requested help from the Texas Rangers to come and quell the riot. When Pat Dooling arrived and stepped off the train, the town officials immediately looked around for the other Rangers. "I'm the Ranger," said Dooling. The townsfolk asked, did they only send one Ranger? To which, Dooling responded, "You've only got one riot, haven't you?" He soon quelled the riot and boarded the next train. Outlaws and bad men were called long riders, and to the Texas Ranger which followed them belly end through the brush, according to his own proverb, they were no better than their horses. Booted sheriffs from Brownsville on the Rio Grande to the Hole in the Wall in the Big Horn Mountains lived in the saddle. "We are rough men and used to rough ways." Bob Younger, to a newspaper reporter following the 1876 Northfield raid. On the 21st of August, 1863, 6 years before the start of the Civil War, in the ongoing Kansas/Missouri border war, William Clark Quantrill and his band of ruthless raiders attacked Lawrence, Kansas, burning the town to the ground and killing more than 180 men and boys. Quantrill's Confederates fled at the sound of approaching Union troops. On the 7th of September, 1876, a bloody battle ensued in Northfield, Minnesota, when the James Younger gang tries to rob the First National Bank. 2 members died. Cole Younger was shot 11 times but managed to survive. Frank and Jesse James and 4 others escaped. Frank and Jesse James learned their methods of gunmanship and murder under the command of William Quantrill. The Saga of the Old West. A pioneer is a man who turned all the grass upside down, strung barbed wire over the dust that was left, poisoned the water, cut down the trees, killed the Indian who owned the land and called it progress. Charles M. Russell. The saga of the Old West is filled with tales of adventure, with pioneers roving the plains seeking the unknown in the vast territorial lands west of the Mississippi River. Among these pioneers were identifiable contingents of African Americans, at a time when the American government's major quest was to fulfill its manifest destiny. The Old West represented a new home, a new beginning, and a new opportunity to enjoy freedom, but it also identifies many hardships, economic and political, and unfamiliar social challenges. The Old West was both quixotic and inclusive. Indians, outlaws, migrants, and missionaries, all had their reason for roaming the plains of the Old West. But, climactic of all the riders rode the cowboy, who lived with horse and herd. It was a land of vast silent spaces, of lonely rivers, and of plains where the wild game stared at the passing horseman. It was a land of scattered ranches, of long-horned cattle, and of reckless riders who unmoved, looked in the eyes of life or death. Theodore Roosevelt, An Autobiography, 1913. The life of cowboys reached its golden period during the 1870s and 1880s, which was characterized by long, gigantic cattle drives, immense herds being driven 4,000 miles from Texas to the north. Johnson, 1999. 517, and began to die out in the mid-1890s after the disastrous winter of 1886-7 shocked the cattle industry. An increase of settlers stringing barbed wire fences along the trail routes, enabling people to breed cattle, the rapid growth of railroads, and the increase of the stock industry in the northern cities. Dawson, 1973, 128. All contributed to the demise of the Old West cowboy. No cowboy ever quit while his life was hardest and his duties were most exacting. J. Frank Dobrze, A Vaquero of the Brush Country, 1929. There's no place round the campfire for a quitter's blanket. The Ghost Dance and Barbed Wire. The Ghost Dance movement first appeared among the Paiute on reservations in Nevada. Participants believed in the imminent return of the dead and the buffalo, the disappearance of the white man, and the return of the land to the natives. This led to the Paiute Massacre of 1870, in which over half of the tribe was killed by settlers. In 1883, Tutankayotutanka, Sitting Buffalo, was a guest of honor at the opening ceremonies for the Northern Pacific Railroad. When it was his turn to speak, he said in the Lakota language, "I hate all white people. You are thieves and liars. You have taken away our land and made us outcasts." A quick-thinking interpreter told the crowd the chief was happy to be there and that he looked forward to peace and prosperity with the white people. Sitting Buffalo received a standing ovation. Around 1900 the cowboy and Indian era suffered the same fate. Ending abruptly, the trail drives were stopped by the barbed wire fences of the encroaching settlers, and the Indians, defeated in the Indian Wars of the 1890s, were secured on reservations. Barbed wire, a fencing material made of twisted wire with spaced coiled barbs, turned the open plains of the West into enclosed pastures and forever changed the society and economy of the region. The invention of Illinois farmer Joseph Farwell Glidden, who received his patent in the 24th of November, 1874. Ranchers could now isolate their cattle and control breeding. Though Texas cowboys continued tending cattle and kept their ranches, their role was no longer the most prominent in the cattle industry. The best way to get a cowboy to do something is to suggest he is too old for it. Nevertheless, the American cowboy, the last frontiersman, represents a unique period of social transition that witnessed a reuniting of North and South after the Civil War, a geographical movement from east to west, a population shift from rural to urban, a declaration of cultural independence from Europe, the emergence of the nation on the world stage, and a lifestyle change from the rigors of frontier existence to a more sedentary life of second-hand adventures. In the Old West the phrase left afoot meant nothing short of being left flat on your back. A man on foot is no man at all. If an enemy could not take a man's life, the next best thing was to take his horse. Where cow thieves went free, horse thieves were hanged, and to say that a man was as common as a horse thief was to express the nadir of commonness. The pillow of the frontiersman who slept with a six-shooter under it was a saddle, and hitched to the horn was the loose end of a stake rope. We never did hang the wrong one but once or twice, and them fellers needed to be hung anyhow jays on general principles. A nameless judge in the Old West. After a horse thief had been arrested and tried, he was found innocent by a jury. When they filed back into the courtroom and the foreman stated the verdict, he liked the sound of his voice so much it took him over an hour of fancy talking to tell the court that the defendant had been found innocent of all charges. When he was finally done pontificating, the judge shook his head and said, "You'll have to reconsider, the defendant was hung a couple of hours ago." Or, comparably, as in this tale, a Texas cowboy was arrested for stealing a horse. He pleaded not guilty at his trial. When his lawyer managed to get him off and he was set free by the judge, he started to leave the courtroom. Suddenly he turned around and looked at the judge with puzzlement before asking, "Judge, does this mean I can keep the horse?" The singing cowboy, horse and ballad. Wearing gloves and button-fly jeans means you better think ahead. With the advent of the horse, the ways and the psychology of the Plains Indians entered into the age of horse culture which dominated the West and Southwest almost until the automobile. Astride horses introduced by the conquistadores to the Americas, the Plains Indians became almost a separate race from the foot-moving tribes of the East and the stationary pueblos of the Rockies. The earliest American explorers and trappers of both plains and Rocky Mountains went out in the saddle. The first industrial link between the East and the West was a mounted pack train beating out the Santa Fe Trail. On west beyond the end of this trail, in Spanish California, even the drivers of oxen rode on horseback. The first transcontinental express was the Pony Express. I wear a bandana, my spurs are of silver, my pony is grey-dappled, and while riding the ranges my luck never changes. With foot in the stirrup I gallop for I. I gallop for I, with foot in the stirrup I gallop for I. Whoopee-ki-I-yi-I. The Pony Express was in operation for only 19 months from April 1860 through October 1861. The Pony Express carried almost 35,000 pieces of mail over more than 650,000 miles during those 19 months and lost only one mail sack. The typical Pony Express rider was 19 years old and made $100, $150 per month plus room and board. Away across the endless dead level of the prairie a black speck appears against the sky. In a second or two it becomes a horse and rider, and the flutter of the hooves comes faintly to the ear. In another instant, a man and horse burst past our excited faces, and go winging away like a belated fragment of a storm. An observer, on the passing of a Pony Express rider. Spanish conquistadores first saddled their horses in Veracruz and rode until they had mapped the continents from the Horn to Montana and from the Floridas to the harbors of the Californias. The padres with them rode on horseback, too, and made every mission a horse ranch. The national dance of Mexico, the jarabe, is an interpretation of the clicking of hoofs and the pawing and prancing of spirited horses that the Aztecs noted when the Spaniards came. Likewise, the cowboy songs are rhymed to the walk of horses. Riding a bronc is like dancing with a girl. The trick is matching your partner's rhythm. Many cowboy ballads originated as a means of quieting stampede-prone cattle at night. Composed impromptu by cowhands riding around the herds, the often atonal songs took their rhythm from a horse's gait. Some had mournful tunes, but no words, and were termed Texas lullabies. There is no evidence that real cowboys yodeled, although some of the calls they used in herding cattle might have sounded similar to yodeling. Yoopee, one of the oldest and best known of the old-time cowboy songs, is modeled on an old Irish piece, Rocking the Cradle. References to this song appear in the writings of Owen Wister and Andy Adams, describing life on the cattle drives. It was included in John Lomax's 1910 edition of Cowboy Songs and Other Frontier Ballads and in Carl Sandburg's 1927 American Songbag. Like other true cowboy songs, it describes the work of the cowboys and gives us insight into the business of driving cattle. The lonesome wail of the cattle call imparted a feeling of mournful isolation. The purpose of the call was to let the cattle know the herders were there, so they would not be startled, and also to let the other night herders know the singer's location with respect to the herd. In camp, they enjoyed long ballads around the circle. Jules Verne Allen was born in 1883, in Ellis County, Texas. He began ranch work at age 10 and became an experienced cowboy, participating in long trail drives. He learned to play the guitar and often performed for his fellow ranch hands. As he began to perform professionally, he brought his songs from the cow camps to radio stations, WFFA in Dallas and WFI and KNX in Los Angeles. In 1928 he began to record for Victor. Allen, along with Charles Nabel and Kyle T. Sprague, is one of the most important of the early, authentic, singing cowboys. He died in 1945. Rodeo rider and stuntman, Francis Henry Maynard, another one of the more authentic singing cowboys, recorded 8 songs for Columbia in 1930. In the 1934 film, In Old Santa Fe, he introduced Gene Autry to movie audiences. His singing was rustic when compared to the warbling of Gene Autry, or Roy Rogers. Nevertheless, he was a well-known movie cowboy for 2 decades. He died in 1973. Once the cattle were delivered, the more uninhibited cowboys went to town to drink, fight, gamble, dance and carouse with prostitutes, wasting all their pay in just a few days. In this practice, they resembled sailors on shore leave, work like you don't need money and dance like no one is watching. The Cowboy's Lament. In the relative isolation of the long trail drives, cowboys found they had to provide their own entertainment. Most cowboys probably knew at least snatches of songs, but not many could carry much of a tune. As with any group, there were some who were natural entertainers, who had better voices, and who accumulated a larger repertoire of songs. Most singing was rough and unaccompanied. While guitars might accompany a song back at the ranch, they did not really go on trail drives. The only instruments that found their way into a cowboy's saddlebags were pocket-sized ones like the harmonica and Jew's harp, and perhaps an occasional fiddle. After the Civil War, with the development of the cattle industry, ballads of the range became popular. Usually sung or recited, these ballads were orally transmitted, and the names of their author-composers were often lost. The same process occurred in Spanish verse along the Mexican border in South Texas, where corridos were composed, sung, and passed down from one generation to the next. Collecting cowboy ballads and corridos became a major occupation of scholars and folklorists in the 20th century. Even the skillful and popular recitative piece Lasca, 1882, at one time the best known of all Texas poems, was passed around and handed down orally. By the time it got into print, lines had been lost and the author identified only as Frank Desprez. Not until the 1950s was anything known about this Englishman, who was for 3 years occupied on a Texas ranch before he returned to England and became a professional writer. Cowboys were not an illiterate lot, many were relatively educated men, seeking adventure in the West, escaping from the past or simply from the pressures of civilization. Some of them wrote a great deal, and often, this verse became attached to old familiar folk or popular melodies and entered oral tradition as folk songs. John I White's book Git Along Little Dogies is an excellent treatment of a number of these cowboy poet-songwriters. Cowboy songs and ballads are generally ranked alongside Negro spirituals as being the most important of America's contributions to folk song. As compared with the Old English and Scottish ballads, the cowboy and all other ballads of the American frontiers generally sound cheap and shoddy. Since John Lomax brought out his collection in 1910, cowboy songs have found their way into scores of songbooks, have been recorded on hundreds of records, and have been popularized, often and naturally without any semblance to cowboy style, by thousands of radio singers. 2 general anthologies are recommended especially for the cowboy songs they contain: American Ballads and Folk Songs by John and Alan Lomax, Macmillan, New York, 1934, The American Songbag by Carl Sandburg, Harcourt, Brace, New York, 1927. The best-known pieces reflecting pioneer or prairie life, For the Old Western Cowboy, Oh Bury Me Not on the Lone Prairie and The Dying Cowboy or The Cowboy's Lament are cowboy adaptations of an earlier composed song which had entered into sea song tradition, The Ocean Burial. Written by the Reverend Edwin H. Chapin, the song begins, Oh, bury me not in the deep, deep sea, published in 1839 and copyrighted in 1850 as the work of George N. Allen. It offers a classic example of the process of oral tradition transformed into a very different entity, localized in a new setting, with deep meaning for a whole and entirely different group of people. There are a number of recorded instances of individuals who at various times worked both as sailors and as cowboys. In the film, Jeremiah Johnson Robert Redford portrays a sailor turned mountain man and legend, and in the Spaghetti B Western, My Name is Nobody Terence Hill portrays Nobody, a mischievous trickster guiding a quick-draw shootist, his idolized hero, first unto fame against the notorious Wild Bunch and then into anonymity, as a sailor bound for the Orient. Compare Joseph Conrad, Lord Jim. Charles J. Finger, in his little 1923 booklet, Sailor Shanties and Cowboy Songs, gives some very interesting account of interaction between sailors and cowboys, of the way songs of one occupation would be swapped with songs of the other. The earliest claim for authorship of the Cowboy's Lament is in 1876, by Francis Henry Maynard. At that time he was working with the Grimes outfit wintering cattle on the Salt Fork of the Arkansas River on the Kansas Indian Territory border. He claimed to be inspired by the Dying Girl's Lament at that time sung by cowboys, changing the lyrics to fit cowboy life as he knew it. He moved the scene from a hospital to Tom Sherman's barroom, a popular watering hole in Dodge City. The whorehouse bells are ringing. Guy Logg's Den, 1989, p. 291, University of Illinois Press. While Maynard, having taken out a copyright, is generally credited with the authorship, the Cowboy's Lament appears in Jack Thorpe's Songs of the Cowboys. Thorpe claims in a note to the poem, authorship is credited to Troy Hale, Battle Creek, Nebraska. I first heard it sung in a barroom at Wisner, Nebraska, about 1886. The traditional version was well known by 1898, when Owen Wister included a verse in his great Western novel Lynn McLean. Throughout the years the locale was moved to Lerdu, and the song became known as the Streets of Lerdo, versions retaining terminology from the unfortunate rake, the narrative becoming confused with old Irish expressions dating back to the Bard of Armagh. Marty Robbins recorded the song in the 50s. Johnny Cash did a version of the song on his last album. A ballad is a story told in song which usually includes repetition, 4-line stanzas and a rhyming pattern. The Dying Cowhand's Lamentation is composed, though, in free verse with no established stanza sequence, neither meter nor rhyme. A lay of the Dying Cowhand's Lamentation. I'm a bullwacker far from home. If you don't like me, just leave me alone. Eat my grub when hungry, drink when dry, whack, punch, swar, then lay down and die. A lay of the Dying Cowhand's Lamentation. Illo, illo, lama sabachthani. I'm a rowdy cowboy just off the stormy plains. My trade is girting kack and pulling bridle reins. Oh, I can tip the lasso, it is with graceful ease. I can rope a streak of lightning, and ride it where I please. Come, my dear friends, and a sad story I'll plait. Oh, list a while to the lay of a poor dying cowhand, and scorn not the pains of a poor dying boy. Come a yoopee. Oh, it was quite early one fine morning that I went on down a privy way to Roy Bean's dram and dame house, with a hey, and a ho, and a hey 9-0. I so very early one morning came. 'Twas a very glorious spring morning, hey ding-a-ding. Ding in the clear and bright mid-month of May, from the woods bird song so lovely, coolly wafting, as if flower fragrant, like a honey-scented breeze, as if flower fragrant, like a honey-scented breeze, as if flower fragrant, like a honey-scented breeze. And gladsome earth was all flesh clad in, oh, a frashing mantle of glistening gleam. Oh, so cold was the morning, and dewy wet that new day, as I strode out onto the street down by Roy Bean's dram and dame house, Roy Bean's dram and dame house. Oh, as I strode out onto the street down by Roy Bean's. Tea was there, so very pale and fair. I espied a handsome young cowpuncher with wavy blonde hair and 2 brown, sparkling eyes, lying there, and cruel was his fate. A hole in his bosom, his teeth were a-closen, and his tongue, all inflamed, hung o'er his chin. He whispered so slowly and quite lowly said, as I came by, come sit ye here just one moment down by my side. And heavy breathed he, his dull voice heaving, oh heaving dull sobs, crying, crying, crying. Bawdy merrymaking and cold laughter could be heard coming from inside of Roy Bean's dram and dame house. Willow, willow, willow. Sing, oh the green willow shall be my garland. Oh willow, willow, willow. The lawless wilderness is ruled by but one plain and simple truth. The quick ruled the dead, oh the quick ruled the dead. The quick ruled the dead, and inside of Roy Bean's, double-dealing gamblers therein cheat at palming cards, and therein Lady Luck, her, no fortune wouldst she keep in the bottom dealt hopes of the honest young tenderfeet. And the love in their eyes was by flash girls stolen, to be hidden away between their powder-pampered titties. Now, the handsome young cowpuncher was stretched out, there laid down on a slicker, all dressed up in his buckskins, all fit out in his buckskins, blood-stained, fit out for the grave. He was shot through the breast and left covered with his strewn cards, left lying in the dust all alone, and there upon his forehead grim death, a hellish brand so cruelly put. Oh, his eyes were fast glazing. Death was quick approaching, and the handsome young cowpuncher would soon be quite dead. Oh, his white lips were curled and twisted. His white lips they trembled, tortured with pain, and he spake in a whisper, quite lowly. 'T was as if soft smiling. Oh, he was remembering of some scene of a life long ago, forever now far behind him in memory, of his home to the east which he'd never see again. And spake he these words in passing, saying unto me, I can see by your armor that you are a cowhand just like me. Hi ho, my heart is heavy. Oh, these words he did say, and he was breathing quite heavily. Oh, he was breathing quite heavily. He was breathing quite heavy, and his voice it was whispered so dull, and his lips were flame red. They done gunned me down, and run off and left me here in the dust of the street outside of Roy Bean's, just like I was dead, just like I was dead, just like I was dead. Oh, come, won't you sit down here just by my side, come. Listen and hear what I have to say, hear my sad life story. I wish to give it to you. I am shot in the breast and I know that I must die. Hell is my doom, for I know that I've done wrong. I know I've done wrong, and I'll soon be quite dead. I had a home once and a loving mother, so good and gentle to me. I had a darling sister, all my pride and joy. I loved her from her childhood, for I had none else beside. I've loved her as a brother, and with a brother's care I've tried through grief and sorrow her gentle heart to cheer. But both did I leave for to wild wander. Oh, I long ago left there to go ranging. I wanted to range all of the world and traveled from Candia to old Mexico. Now I must die, and so far away from them, for we are separated. Now I must die here alone outside of Roy Bean's in the dust of the street, with my cards. Now I must die. Go write me a letter to all of my brothers, and one, also, to my sister so dear. Oh, so dear. But not one word of this do you mention, as you all gather round me my sad story to hear. Don't write to my mother, oh, please don't inform her of the wretched condition that death caught me in. I know it would grieve her at the loss of her darling firstborn son. Oh, wish could I to my childhood return once again. Oh, wish could I to my childhood return and never leave. 'Twas once in the saddle that I used to go dashing, once in the saddle that I used to go happy, oh, so gay. I have tried to live honest, tried to shoot square, and I've given all men good as was their due, but I just took up to drinking and card playing, which brought me to trouble, and now I am through. Got shot by a sneaky bottom-dealing gambler and his dirty slut whore, and they left me here alone in the cold growing darkness, and I am dying now here all alone today. Oh, a shot from a 6-shooter took my young life away. So cruel was the man that shot me in the breast, he was cheating at dealing the cards and I called him. So cruel was my lady luck, she was holding put my hand, I might have applied to some friends that were near me, to save my poor life, but before now they were all gone. Oh, all were gone. With that came out his paramour, she was white as the lily flower. Hey, troll, trolley, lolly. With that came out her own dear knight, he was true as ever for the fight. Hey, troll, trolley, lolly, lo. My curse let it rest on the fair one who first drove me forth far away from my home, oh, far from the family and friends that I loved. She told me that she loved me, just to deceive me. My curse be may it rest upon her wherever she roam. Oh, she was fair. Oh, she was lovely. She was a lady, and the belle of the village, she once was the fairest of all. But her heart was as cold as the snow on the mountains, she gave me up at once for the glitter of gold, oh, she gave me up for the glitter of gold, the glitter of gold. And though my life it has finished, I am over and done with. I am done with wild wandering away forever, far from my home and relations, those people I love, those people I love. Love. Those people I love, and shall never see more. Go gather around me a class of bold rangers who shoot fast and straight, and tell them the story of their comrade's sad fate. Give each one and all of them a timely good warning quite gently, say, oh please stop with your gold gambling. And quit drinking with powder-painted ladies. Oh give up wild roving and gold gambling before it's too late. Tell one to tell the other before they go any further to give up their wild roving before it's too late, before they are cut down in the height of their bloom. Oh I'm a young cowhand and I know I done wrong. Oh I'm a young cowhand and I know I am doomed. 'Twas once as a bronco buster I used to be brave, but tain't it a pity, I came down to Roy Beans to gamble and drink with flash girls, and now to the cold grave. And now to the cold grave. The cold grave. Get 6 jolly cowhands to come handle my coffin, oh let 16 pretty maidens fair sing to bear up my pall. Let them put bunches of white lilies all over my coffin. Let them throw roses to deaden you footsteps as they fall. Oh pound the drum loudly and play the fife proudly, play up the death march as you carry me along. But give up no wild whoopies, no wild whoopies to chase off the devil as you carry me along, oh to scare off the devil as you carry me along. No wild whoopies to chase off the devil over the hillside and beat him, on down around the stump over the meadow onto you green meadow, whore for bequeath why go and lay me down, for I'm a young cow puncher and know I done bought me hell. I'm an honest young cow puncher even though, and I know, I done wrong. Hi ye a poor lonesome cow hand gone wild roving, hi ye come ye and list to my sad song, hi ye about a lonely boy who knew he'd done so wrong. Then drag your rope very slowly and rattle your spurs ever so lowly, take me not though out onto the lonesome prairie and fire ye no salvo ye fire o'er to where you lay me down, to send a poor cow hand back to his home, for I'm an honest young cow hand cut down in the height of my prime. I'm just an honest cow hand even though I done so wrong, and I'm shot in the guts and I know I must die. Oh I'm shot through and now I must die. And now I must die. Now must I die. Must I die? Oh I die. I die. Oh bury me not out though, y'all, oh out on the lonesome prairie where the wild coyotes will howl over me. Oh bury me not all alone out on the lonely prairie, where the rattlesnakes hiss and the wind blows, oh so free. Oh please bury me not beside my knife and my 6-shooter, not with silver spurs on my heels, not with rifle by my side. Bury me near by the churchyard down in yon valley so green, there beneath the willow, oh beneath the weeping willow tree. And hang ye up my trusty 6-shooter, high up in the branches over me to prove as fair warning to all that wild wandering was the death of me. Oh place ye no bottles of fine brandy at head nor foot of my grave, instead of a tombstone, to mark my last resting place, that those whom might find may drink and forget about wild wandering away forever and hang up their guns, go back on home to their loving families. That every one who passes by, mightest lift up their eyes not to drink but take in the skies, oh the great starry skies above. Oh drink in the great starry skies for the cow hand below. That perhaps if any honest young cow puncher comes on by, he'll find me there sleeping eternally and perhaps he'll think of me. Last night I lay on the prairie looking up to the stars above, and wondered of those cow-punchers ever drifting on high, ever drifting on high. In the sweet by and by, oh the sweet by and in the dusk of the twilight, listening to the soft winds whispering, so lowly, and the darkening shadows were failing like memories so slowly. Roll on, roll on, roll on little doggies, roll on, roll on, roll on little doggies, roll on. Yippee-tee-yo gi long li l doggies, gi long it's your misfortune and none of my own. The road to that bright happy region is a dim narrow trail, so they say, while the road that leads to perdition is posted and blazed all the way. Yippee-tee-yo. Oh pray sometimes think of me below. Oh had I the wings of a little snow-white dove, so far, far away would I fly, right back into the arms of my one true love, and there would I lay me down dead, but though I have searched, I ne'er yet found one such as she. Oh my friends and relations, they live in the nation, and they know not where their dear boy has gone. I gave up my home wanting to see the whole wild world. I steered my course first here out to the west and hired onto a bold rancher, and the rest you can plainly see. Go take me to the graveyard and throw the dirt over me, throw ye the dirt over me, for I have been murdered, and you know they have done wrong. I began to drink and then I began to souse, my life is soon done. I took to card playing in Roy Bean's dram and Dame House, I got in a brawl and shot through the bowels, and you see where I lay, giving what was unfairly due. Bad fortune, a whore, was the cause of it all. Oh, got shot by a gambler, and am dying here all alone. Now doom is my due, for I know I have done wrong and I'm going to hell. So wrong, I'm going to hell. Oh, I'm going to hell. And never coming back. When I die, just bury me as I be, no box black suit or dandy roller hat, no blue white shirt or shiny shoes with pointed toes so tall. Oh, don't put your moonshine whiskey in my coffin, no deck of cards in my hands. Don't let them weep and wail, don't let 'em moan at all. And put ye no marijuana or tobacco onto my dead body, though you smoke and spit chaw as ye carry me along. Oh, take no rolling dice shooters or card players for pallbearers, no coke snuffers to sing in procession mine funerary song. Put ye no gold in the cold ground with my body, but for the 2 pennies which ye place over my dead staring eyes. Put ice at my feet, though, for the place I am going. I won't even be cool with that. Now doom is my due, for I know I've done wrong and I'm going to hell. I'm going to hell. Oh, I'm going to hell. And never coming back. Oh, carry me with soft steps, mournful, solemn, slow, to a grave ye dug both long and wide, and deep, for I'm a young cowhand and I know I done wrong. And I know I done wrong. So very, very wrong. I wear a bandana, my spurs are of silver, my pony is grey dappled, and while riding the ranges my luck never changes. With foot in the stirrup I gallop, for I gallop, for I, with foot in the stirrup I gallop, for I. Whoopee-ki-yi-yi. Oh, when the valleys were dusty my bronco was trusty. He loped through the blizzards, the snow in his ears, the cattle mayth scattered, but what did it matter? My lasso I used to throw with perfection, roping mossy horn cattle was for us was great fun. To cattle I always gave great satisfaction with a band of wild bronco busters. But now I'm done, oh now I am done. I am done. My stallion was sure at riding and cutting and roping, and my rope was a halter for pig-headed steers, pig-headed steers. And when we were far from the ranches as daylight paled, I cooked over his turds and scrub brush, and when I'd partaken of my hardtack and beans and salted back bacon, I whistled a merry old song of the trail, merry old song of the trail, the trail. I whistled a merry old song of the trail. The sun is fast sinking, the stars fast rising, and I shall never see morning again, oh I shall ne'er see morning again. Come stand ye around me, my breath is expiring, I'll soon be ready to enter the tomb, oh my tomb, and I shall soon enter my tomb. I've missed life eternal, I'm bound for destruction, but God was willing that I should do so, God was willing that I should do so. Grieve not while thinking of my wretched condition, I'm a vile sinner, and now livid must I go. Livid must I go. Oh livid I must go. My pearl maiden will be there to greet me beyond this slow river of death, beyond this slow river of death. She's lovely and pure as the dew on yon white lily. Her image has always been with me, carried me, oh carry me up through my long lonely dim growing memories, grim growing death quickly becoming, my livid dying reality. And that image I'm taking it down through the valley, through the dark lowly vale of tears we call death, locked in my heart to be with me together always. Now at last I am gone, now at last I'm gone. At last, I am gone. Please gather up ye my last hand of poker, the one I dropped when I got my death wound, send it and my empty 6-gun holster home to my father, after you've buried me deep in my tomb, tell them these things were the ruin of his son, and never to part with the last fatal hand, but carry it with him always, just as a reminder of when I first began to drift wild wandering. Oh, a wild wind wandering far away from home forever now. Yet the nation is my home and a dwelling place for me. Oh, a wild wind wandering far away from home forever. And, oh let the turf that my bones shall cover be cut from this land that is trod by the free. Oh, a wild wind wandering far away from home, and wild coyotes are howling over me, oh howling o'er me. Ideli. Please won't someone carry a word to my dear grey-headed mother, my last greeting to my beloved sister, and my niece, oh so dear. Ask them to forgive me what I have sinned against them, for never again will I meet with them here. Tell them I loved them all through my wild wanderings, and that nobody here knows my name. Pity. But there is none other far dearer than mother, or sister, or niece, who would weep bitterly if she knew I were here. No maiden to send for love to share a departing kiss. No memory I might here hold on to give my life some worth. No last letter I had from my dearest lover begging me so kindly to come to my home. Oh please come home. Lord. If I had found and married this lady, quit my wild wandering ways and done as she'd bid, I'd never ever have come down here to roy beans. And now I'm going to die, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. When death in cold arms doth embrace and lull me to sleep, it's by the side of my Rosie that I'll eternally rest in peace. I got in a battle whilst playing at stud poker, and I don't want my people to share in my shame. Oh send for the preacher to say the words over my body, I'm a young cowhand who will soon be quite dead. God shorten my breath, for I'm in such terrible pain. I'm in terrible pain. Terrible pain. Oh send for the doctor to heal up my sore wounds so deep, that I might have salts and pills of white mercury, for I lay here bleeding to painful death alone in the street. A gambler shot me in the breast and now I must die. Oh I must die. I must die. Farewell my friends, farewell my relations, my earthly career has cost me sore. Come, dear mother, too, and sing to me a song, for my knee bones are making, and my poor heart am breaking. Well, I know how I have so done you wrong. Oh come, my dear mother, and sit down nigh beside me. Sit down beside me and hold my hand. Tears pity thy face with sore lamentations. I know I'm a disgrace. In my younger days I used to be so gay, oh so gay. Down around the church house weeping willow trees around me, all the pretty young maidens gathered with armfuls of lavender calling me bold. Oh o'er my coffin put handfuls of lavender on every side, while the women ought to carry me, young whore gals, to woo me so along, bringing with them bunches of sweet-smelling roses to drive me along in procession, covering me with sweet-smelling roses so as not of me to smell. He'd asked for a candle to light him to bed with, likewise white flannel to wrap round his head, for his poor head so aching, and his heart so breaking, for the young cow-puncher lay shot down in the street, and he was dying alone. Dying alone. Dying alone. He'd called again for his mother, his dear grey-headed mother. Oft times she had told him of his past life before Roman, when along came those flash girls and his money he'd squander, and along with those flash girls he'd took his delight. At the top of the street those flash girls were all standing, and one to another they were low whispering, and they said, "There lies a young cowboy whose money we've squandered, there lies a young cowboy shot down dead in his prime." A group had gathered round him, all comrades in affright. The tears rolled down each manly cheek as he said his last good night. Up spoke the dying cow-hand, saying, "Do not weep for me, I'm cross in a dark deep river to a country that is free. Do not weep for me. Oh, won't someone go bring me a drink of cold water to cool my fevered hot temples, ice to soothe my parched lips, it burns like blazes. I think I'll soon be dead." The poor cow-puncher said. The handsome young cow-puncher then ceased to his talking. We all knew he was soon to be dead, soon to be dead. His trials here on earth were soon to be forever over. The handsome young cow-puncher was soon to be dead. I hastened to do his bidding and fetch him cold water. I walked very slowly with downcast head, before I returned, though the dying cow-puncher's liberated spirit had departed from its earthly bonds. His ghost, it had left him and rode the last round up onto the eternal land. It had left him forever and gone to our giver. The young cow-hand lay senseless and dead. And a 6-shooter was in his lifeless hand. Oh, a 6-shooter in his lifeless hand. Oh, a 6-shooter was in his lifeless hand. And now the young cow-hand we wrapped up in his saddle blanket, each by the corners of his bloody-stained slicker, and 4 wild bronco busters we shall carry his dead body. And those little whore gals fair shall carry wild roses and myrtle, following along, not for to smell him as they pass by along in procession. We swung our rope slowly and rattled our spurs slowly, and gave up no wild whoopies as we carried him along. And one of the flash girls bore she, an armful laurel, and violet. ha yo ha yo. O great expanse of the blue sky, see me roaming here, yo he. Again on the warpath lonely. I trust in you, protect me, he. Lasca. Written by Frank Desprez, in 1882. This version from Songs of the Horses 1920, edited by Robert Frothingham. I want free life and I want fresh air, and I long for the gallop after the cattle, in their frantic flight, like the roar of battle, the melee of horns, and hoofs, and heads that wars and wrangles and scatters and spreads the green beneath and the blue above, and dash and danger, and life and love and Lasca. Lasca used to ride on a mouse-grey Mustang close to my side, with blue syrup and bright-belled spur. I laughed with joy as I looked at her. Little knew she of books or of creeds, an Ave Maria sufficed her needs. Little she cared, save to be by my side, to ride with me, and ever to ride, from San Saba's shore to Lavacca's tide. She was as bold as the billows that beat, she was as wild as the breezes that blow. From her little head to her little feet she was swayed in her suppleness to and fro by each gust of passion, a sapling pine that clings to the edge of a beetling bluff, and wars with the wind when the weather is rough, is like this Lasca, this love of mine. She would hunger that I might eat, she'd take the bitter and leave me the sweet, but once, when I made her jealous for fun, at something I'd whispered, or looked, or done, one Sunday, in San Antonio, to a glorious girl in the Alamo, she drew from her garter a dear little dagger, and sting of a wasp. It made me stagger an inch to the left, or an inch to the right, and I wouldn't be maundering here tonight, but she sobbed, and, sobbing, so swiftly bound her torn rebusser about the wound, that I quite forgave her. Scratches don't count in Texas, down by the Rio Grande. Her eye was brown, a deep brown, her hair was darker than her eye, and something in her smile and frown, curled crimson lip and instep high, showed that there ran in each blue vein, mixed with the milder Aztec strain, the vigorous vintage of old Spain. She was alive in every limb with feeling, to the fingertips, and when the sun is like a fire, and the sky one shining, soft sapphire one does not drink in little sips. The air was heavy, the night was hot, I sat by her side, and forgot the herd that was taking its rest, forgot that the air was closer pressed, that the Texas norther comes without warning, in the dead of night or the dawn of morning, and once let the herd at its breath take fright, and nothing on earth can stop its flight, and woe to the rider, and woe to the steed, that falls in front of its mad stampede. Hark! Was that thunder? No, by the Lord. I sprang to my saddle without a word, one foot on mine, and she clung behind away. On a wild chase down the wind. And never was the fox chase half so hard, and never was steed so little spared, for we rode for our lives. You shall hear how we fared in Texas, down by the Rio Grande. The Mustang flew, and we urged him on. There was one chance left, and you have but one halt. Jump to the ground, and shoot your horse, crouch under his carcass and take your chance, and if the steers, in their frantic course, don't batter you both to pieces at once, you may thank your star, or else, goodbye to the quickening kiss and the long-drawn sigh, to the balmy air and the open sky, in Texas, down by the Rio Grande. The cattle gained on us, and just as I felt for my old six-shooter behind in my belt, down came the Mustang, and down came we, clinging together, and what was the rest? A body that spread itself over my breast, two arms that shielded my dizzy head, two lips that close to my lips were pressed. Then came thunder in my ears, as over us surged the sea of steers, blows that beat blood into my eyes, and when I could rise Lasca was dead. I gouged out a grave a few feet deep, and there in earth's bosom I laid her to sleep, and there she is lying, and no one knows, neath summer's sun and winter's snows, full many a day the flowers have spread a pall of petals over her head. And the little gray hawk hangs aloft in the air, and the sly coyote trots here and there, and the black snake glides, and glitters and slides into a rift in a cottonwood tree, and the buzzard sails on and comes and is gone stately and still like a ship at sea. And I wonder why I do not care for the things that are, like the things that were. Does half my heart lie buried there in Texas, down by the Rio Grande? Absquatulate.